I guess ang pinaka-importante na nangyari, yung sinasabi kong last 48 hours before the time she was supposed to be executed. Prior to that, President Aquino already said, we will do anything and everything we can to save her life. You must remember, when we came in, we had a floor contemplation to deal with in Singapore. President Aquino always said, every Filipino life is worth saving. Pag may bagyo nga, yung battle cry always ng kabinete was, there must be no deaths. Minalas naman kami. We had so many of those. There was an ASEAN meeting in Langkawi, Malaysia. Malaysia was the host. Fortunately or unfortunately, the ASEAN gathering there was going to finish on the day or the day before she was supposed to be executed. So when we went to Malaysia, there was a request from the Philippine side for bilateral. Kasi pag may gathering na ganyan, since nandun yung mga head of state, you take advantage of the presence, you have bilateral. A normal bilateral would have the head of state, in our case the president, and a few of us cabinet members. In those bilateral meetings, we discuss trade, business, finance, whatever else. Depending kung sino yung kabilateral mo, the president will ask cabinet members to join him. I remember that the request for a bilateral with Indonesia was submitted because you do months before those gatherings, ang dami nang nangyayari, dami nang exchanges, topics, discussion. Nag-request tayo ng bilateral with Indonesia.
At that time, the president was it already Joko Widodo?
Yes. And then, syempre, pinag-uusapan ko kung ano yung agenda ng bilateral. We presented, again, Al Secretary Del Rosario presented that there was going to be a discussion about Mary Jane. Syempre, yung Indonesian side, by then, we had exhausted lahat ng pwedeng gawin. We exhausted the diplomatic options. Our ambassador to Indonesia presented our appeal officially. We presented our appeal to the ambassador of Indonesia in the Philippines. President Aquino wrote an official letter to the President Widodo and then a personal letter to President Widodo. And wala, zero kasi sabi ng Indonesia, hindi namin ginagawa yan. Ang dami na namin na-execute for drugs because gusto namin ipakita na seryoso kami, hindi namin tatanggapin. So nung na-request yun, syempre yung Indonesian side, sinabi na, di ba napag-usapan na to na wala kaming magagawa and all that. So nag-request ng 4 eyes.
What does 4 eyes
okay,
mean?
Karin yung 4 eyes kasi, sabi ko, bilateral minsan buong kabinete or kung sino yung involved, no? Yung 4 eyes is just the head of state and another person. Sometimes, yung 4 eyes, kung it's purely about trade or security, it's the President and the Secretary of National Defense.
Oh, so it's literally the eyes.
It's
because
literally the eyes
it's a
kasi
letter I, but
apat
that's
lang
why
kayo.
apat lang yung mata. Okay.
So, pag sinabi mong kayo lang sila lang mag-uusap, this case, sila lang talaga. Usually, translator yung isa kung kailangan or what. No? But, in other words, pag sinabi mong mag-request ka nun, napaka-seryoso nitong topic na to.
And President Noynoy Aquino requested it at that time with
Yes,
President
and as a
Widodo.
courtesy, you never refuse a request from another head of state. I remember the night before, so this was 2 nights before the execution night of Mary Jane. We were in Malaysia, we were preparing for this meeting, and sabi nga ng namin, ano pa bang pwede nating sabihin? This is the question ng Pangulo. Pinaliwanag na natin lahat ng kailangan kung bakit inosente siya, hindi niya alam na may drugs pala and all that. Ano pa ang pwedeng sabihin? I remember the discussion went to the point of, kasi tayong Pilipino, nasa kultura natin yung pagpahalaga sa buhay ng tao. Now, remember, we were dealing with a predominantly Muslim country. We were Christians. We couldn't even say na, hindi kami mga, hindi. So the posturing was, iba yung pagpahalaga natin sa buhay ng tao. Sabi pa nga namin kaya walang suicide bomber na Filipino, di ba? Kasi lumaki tayo na yung pagpahalaga natin sa buhay ng tao iba. So, imagine the conversation between 2 heads of state in that context. Not a technical discussion, not a geopolitical trade or anything to that effect. Anyway, that meeting happened. It didn't go well. I know it didn't go well because when they came out of it, the president didn't look happy. But there was a reception kasi final night ng ASEAN eh. So merong yung final dinner and all that. So very busy yan. Ang daming nangyayari. I'm covering so many other discussions with other governments. At the reception, the president, I was already told the president wants to meet you and Sec Albert right after. So we went to the president's room. There's a sofa. And I need to tell this story because there are two people who really worked hard, Sec Albert and the president.
Secretary Albert Del Rosario was the Foreign Affairs Secretary at that time.
Okay. At that time, sinabihan na si Secretary Del Rosario na wag na siyang bumiyahe. He had a back problem, na-operahan na siya. At sinabi na ng mga doktor, wag ka nang bumiyahe. Wag ka nang, hindi mabuti yan, delikado yan, baka ma-paralyze ka to be exact. No? And I really saw the intensity of the effort because when we went to the president's room, there was a sofa. And I said this actually during the wake of Secretary Del Rosario when I was paying tribute to him. When we sat down the sofa, I saw the face of Secretary Del Rosario, really, yung grimace, tsaka talaga sabi niya, aray, because the pain was so bad.
Yeah.
I need to tell that story because despite that, I found out later when we arrived in Manila that night he barely slept. Secretary De Lima was telling me, grabe si Albert, tumatawag sa akin every hour on the hour. So nangyari nung meeting na yon, diniscuss yung I refer to as the Hail Mary pass in football, di ba? Yung nagawa mo na lahat. And you as a lawyer will appreciate this.
And you were nearing the execution of Mary Jane Veloso.
We knew the execution was going to happen the next night,
yeah.
Midnight of the next day. So the Hail Mary pass was the legal option. There was an option that said, if we can prove that Mary Jane was a key witness to a case in the Philippines, then we would have legal basis to request Indonesia to stay her execution pending her participation in the legal process in the Philippines. Remember, I fully understood President Widodo's situation. He couldn't stay because there was an Australian that was going to be and was eventually executed. And for years, they've been executing Europeans and whoever else for the same offense. So parang...
So there was really not much basis for an exemption suddenly.
Parang sasabihin mong, so what's special with the Philippines? Why will you save a Filipina and you executed everyone else?
Yeah.
So that night, sinimulan yung last Hail Mary pass na yon. So ang usapan was, the cases should be filed in the Philippines and you as a lawyer know, hindi lang siya yung prosecutor, yung you had to reach a level wherein the court will determine who are the witnesses.
Yes, yeah.
So, Secretary,
how did they do that in less than 24
in less than
hours?
24 hours.
Oh my
so,
goodness, you
tulugan.
had prosecutors suddenly working and then
the problem
the case being suddenly raffled off to a court.
So, yun yung initiative ni Secretary De Lima. Kaya sinasabi niya, hindi siya nakatulog because almost every hour tinatawagan siya ni Albert. So, eto na ngayon yung sitwasyon. Hindi namin alam kung tatanggapin ng Indonesia itong sitwasyon na to. So, kinakausap ni Secretary De Lima yung prosecutor ni Mary Jane sa Indonesia. Masigasig yung prosecutor doon, di ba? Kasi trabaho niya yun. That's what he's supposed to do. And again, hindi niya pwedeng i-exempt dahil maraming ibang tatamaan. So, eto na, the next morning, gising na kami, pauwi na kami ng Manila. That was the only time, yun nang nahuli na yung nag-file na ng case, na-determine na. Pero, imaginein mo na kailangan umabot dun sa point na na-raffle na and all that. So, pauwi ng Manila, sabi na namin, kailangan malaman na ng Indonesia na meron tayong, kumbaga, bagong paraan kung paano natin...
Yes. What case was filed, out of curiosity, where Mary Jane could be a witness?
Yung recruiter niya.
So it was a case for illegal
against
recruitment.
the illegal recruitment and trafficking. And we had to take the case to a criminal level, which was internationally... I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. You probably understand this more. We had to prosper the case to a level na it was an internationally accepted situation, na there is a live case. So while we were doing that, the problem was to let the Indonesians know that we were going to do this and to get a temperature check kung what their thoughts are. Siyempre, yung prosecutor na kausap ni Sec Laila was very adamant in saying, yeah, but you have to follow your own laws and procedures in filing that case. So there's a picture of the president on the phone Okay. We were on the plane. Everybody was on board already, but we could not take off because the president wanted the head of state of Indonesia, President Widodo, to at least know this is what we're going to do. So you had Secretary de Lima dealing with the judiciary and of Indonesia. You have Secretary del Rosario dealing with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
Si Retno, she became a very good friend. Until now, she's a good friend of mine. And then I was in charge of dealing with the Office of the President. Unfortunately, nag-take off na yung presidente ng Indonesia. He was on the plane. So, I mean,
Because you were all leaving Malaysia at that time.
lahat paalis na ng Malaysia, pauwi na eh. So, we couldn't get to him. That's why President Aquino said, I want to talk to Minister Retno to tell her now we're going to do this. So, as records will show, she did say, yes, I will make sure the president knows.
Wow.
So
and
we
these
board the
were
flight.
like a few hours before the execution,
Okay,
right?
so we board the flight. Eh, malayo-layo yung walang kahoy, di ba? I think it's about 4 or 5 hours. Eh, pag landing namin dito, it's early evening na.
And in that time, there was no connection, meaning wala pang Wi-Fi sa eroplano ninyo
Walang
that
wifi
time.
sa aeroplano, wala pang Viber, wala pang WhatsApp, cellphone
So
lang talaga.
talagang suspense yung buong 4 to 5 hours.
Ano nga eh, yung mga, alam ko, the other cabinet members are already on board the plane, but nasa baba, ako, si Secretary del Rosario, then lumabas si Pangulo, tapos tinawagan niya si Retno. So, pagdating namin, the next step was, what is the documentation na ipapadala natin to Indonesia to prove na nahabla na dito yung recruiter, na may kaso na dito, na may gagawin. So that was the initiative. Kaya photo finish tayo because sabi nga namin, even President Aquino said, by the grace of God nagawa to. As a matter of fact, yung Hail Mary pass na yon was so bad na the President called Sister Agnes, yung madre sa Davao na paborito niyang kausap. Sinabi niya, Sister, pagdasal niyo kasi eto na yung, kumbaga, eto na to. Pag hindi pa rin na ilusot to, tapos na, wala na tayong magagawa. So, we finished it. Fortunately for us, Mary Jane was number 1 on the list. I think she was number 6 in the execution sequence. She was already given her meal, she was dressed, as a matter of fact, she did not know. All she knew was, and I don't even think the family knew, ang nalaman lang niya na biglang nung, natapos na yung iba, sinabi ni Serbian siya, hindi ka matutuloy.
Grabe. Imagine the tension for her as well.
And that was ours, because the President had to sign the letter, Secretary de Lima had to complete, kasi hindi lang naman sulat. Siyempre may
all the supporting documents.
Yeah.
And the court would have to issue them and, of course, authenticate.
And then si Secretary del Rosario signed it to endorse it to the government of Indonesia, and the President had to sign it. And that was all done close to midnight.
Oh, my goodness.
And then the prosecutor said, okay, natanggap na namin. Ano pa yun eh, fax pa yun.
I was going to ask if you were able to send like scanned copies via an email or did you have to courier?
So, and then the other hard copy was to be brought here. So yun na yung nangyari. And then the President called me about 3 o'clock in the morning and said, bukas ng umaga, gusto ko ikaw ang mag-press con sa Malacanang press briefing. The reason for that was because he said, ayaw ko na ma-offend ang Indonesia. We have to make it clear because we understood the complexity of Indonesia. Yung marami na kaming na-execute. Iba-ibang bansa na ang nag-request, wala kaming binigay. And so, that was the story. And the basis really was the fact na may kaso dito sa Pilipinas to which she was a key witness. Therefore, we needed her alive. And I think there's international practice on something about witnesses and all that Indonesia decided to respect. This is the first time it was done, I'm told.
Wow. Whose idea was it?
Okay, that's exactly what I cannot remember now because I had to call Secretary de Lima over the weekend. Sabi nga ni Laila sa akin, siguro dapat magkwento ka na kasi dalawa na lang tayong buhay na naiwan na nakakaalam sa...
Yes, so 4 of you worked hard on this. Former President
really
Benigno Aquino, and then former DFA Secretary del Rosario.
At the wake of Secretary del Rosario, I told Tita Gretchen, the wife, sabi ko, if there was somebody who should be given credit for Mary Jane's life, It was, I mean, imagine, this was an old man with a back problem who was supposed to stay home, lie down, and not travel. And yet was so intensely, talagang nandun siya, talagang nahiya nga ako. Siyempre, gusto mo na matulog. Pagod ka eh, basta ASEAN, pagod ka dahil 3 nights kayo walang tulog. Every night, si Pangulo will have a meeting or a speech. So the night before, we would be with him to prepare. Medyo, President Aquino was very gusto niya pinapag-aralan niya lahat. So, babasahin niya yung speech niya, i-edit namin yung speech kapag bilateral.
And I remember he always fact check. Like if there's statistic there, he would ask if this is accurate.
It's very, kaya ako, ang practice ko noon, kahit gusto ko na matulog, hindi mo na ako matutulog hanggang hindi siya matutulog. Dahil pag iniwanan mo siya at may babasahin niya, pag may nabasa siya na hindi malinaw, malamang tatawagan ka. So, pre, ano to? Kamsek, ano to? Bakit ganito? So, pagod na lahat. But the energy of Secretary Del Rosario and President Aquino was so intense. Talagang yung single-minded direction na, no, we will save her life. And true enough, that was the wonderful story. And I was talking to people earlier in your team. They're saying, Sir, bakit hindi to lumabas dati? We have to respect Indonesian law. And in diplomacy, there's just so many complexities and you want to be very careful. We did not want to offend Indonesia. We did not want to, and there's no offense to this. This is a legal process. I congratulate President Marcos and his team for having finally closed this and bringing her home because as far as we were concerned, saka na natin pag-usapan kung paano what the future will be, how we're going to bring her back home. But the most important thing is to stop her execution.
Yes, imagine you were able to do that while she was already up for being executed.
I'm sorry, she was dressed to be executed.
Yeah.
She was given her last meal, the family, the ambassador, our ambassador was there, brought I don't know which relative was there on the
and
time before
execution. Rene, did you have an opportunity to talk to Mary Jane?
No, we never had.
So you never had the opportunity?
We never had. The Sec Albert and the DFA team who was there. Yung problema kasi parang parallel initiative, so everybody had a specific assignment what we were trying to do. We were calling Indonesian friends. We were calling anybody who would, at the very least, and everyone we talked to said, sorry, wala kami magawa. Ganyan talaga dito. Pag drug offense, execution talaga. Yan ang ano.
And they were that strict.